Marry me, Mr. Masterson, today, before you change your mind. Every head in the Silver Spur saloon turned. Eliza Calloway stood exactly 3 feet from the most dangerous man in Caldwell Flats, her chin level, her voice carrying no apology whatsoever. Garrett Masterson set down his whiskey glass so slowly, the silence around it was deafening. He looked at her the way a man looks at something he cannot categorize. Then he said 4 words. "You sure about that? If you're new here, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and follow this story all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels." 3 weeks before she walked into that saloon, Eliza Calloway had exactly $11, a battered trunk, and a cut above her left eyebrow that was still healing. She hadn't told anyone how she got the cut. She hadn't told anyone much of anything, because the kind of people who asked questions in Hearts Crossing, Nebraska, were the same kind of people who would send word back to her father that his daughter had run. And Eliza could not afford for that word to travel faster than she did. She had taken the eastbound mail coach as far as her money would stretch, then transferred to a freight wagon heading into Wyoming territory with a driver named Hobb, who talked to his mules more than he talked to passengers, which suited her perfectly. She sat in the back among flour sacks and coils of rope and watched Nebraska disappear behind her and let herself breathe for the first time in what felt like years. She was 24 years old. She had been told repeatedly and by multiple people that 24 was too old. Too old to be unmarried. Too old to start over. Too old to expect anything good to still be waiting ahead of her. Her aunt had said it with genuine pity. Her cousin Ruth had said it with satisfaction. Her father had said it with the flat certainty of a man delivering a weather report. Eliza had stopped listening to all of them at approximately the same moment. She stopped believing that the life they described for her was the only life available. She had found the advertisement tucked into a week-old copy of the Wyoming Territorial Gazette that someone had left on the seat of the mail coach. It was small 4 lines at the bottom of the 3rd page, sandwiched between notices for a lost bay mare and a reward for information on a cattle thief. Seeking capable woman, unmarried, of sound character and practical mind, to assist in the management of a working cattle ranch and fulfill the terms of a legal partnership agreement. Apply in writing to G. Masterson, Broken Spur Ranch, Caldwell Flats, Wyoming Territory. She had read it 3 times. Then she had folded the paper carefully and put it in her coat pocket, and she had not taken it out again until she was sitting at the small writing desk in the back room of the Hearts Crossing boarding house the night before she left, with the landlady's candle burning low and her hands absolutely steady. She had written a letter. It was not a romantic letter. It was not a desperate letter, though she was in certain technical senses of the word desperate. It was a precise and honest accounting of what she had to offer. She could read and do figures better than most men she had ever met. She had managed the household accounts for her family's farm since she was 16. She knew livestock, not the romantic version, but the real one, the work of it, the weight of it. She was not afraid of hard weather or harder decisions. She did not require luxury or entertainment. She required only a fair arrangement and the chance to prove her usefulness. She signed it E. Calloway and gave the address of a post office box she had rented in Laramie, figuring she would be passing through on her way somewhere, wherever somewhere turned out to be. She had not expected a response. She had received 3. The first letter from G. Masterson arrived 10 days after she sent hers, written in a hand that was economical and direct. No flourishes, no pleasantries, no wasted words. Miss Calloway. Your letter was clear. Most aren't. I have specific needs for Broken Spur that require someone with the capacity you describe. I have additional questions before I can assess whether this arrangement would be suitable. G. Masterson. The questions that followed were not what she expected. He did not ask about her appearance, or her age, or whether she could cook. He asked about her experience with contract negotiation. He asked whether she had ever dealt with a creditor. He asked bluntly whether she had ever been in a situation that required her to make a decision under pressure with incomplete information, and if so, what she had decided, and why. She answered every question with the same precision she had put into the first letter. Yes, she had negotiated. Yes, she understood. Creditors understood them the way you understand a storm by having been caught in one. Yes, she had made decisions under pressure. She told him about the spring of 1882, when her father's illness had left the farm unmanageable, and she had made the decision to sell the north pasture acreage rather than lose the whole property, a decision her father had called reckless when he recovered and then claimed as his own idea the following year. She did not editorialize, she simply reported. His second letter came back in 6 days, shorter. The arrangement I am proposing is a legal one, a marriage of contract. There is a land deed complication that requires a wife's signature by the end of this calendar year, or I forfeit a portion of the property to the county. I am not looking for sentiment. I am looking for competence. If this is acceptable to you, I can offer passage money and a fair wage for your work on the ranch, in addition to housing and the legal protections of the arrangement. G. Masterson. Eliza had sat with that letter for a long time. A marriage of contract, not sentiment. Legal protections and passage money and a wage. The kind of arrangement her aunt would have called scandalous, and her father would have called a trap. Eliza called it the clearest offer anyone had ever made her. She wrote back that same evening. Mr. Masterson, I find the terms acceptable. I have one condition of my own, that this arrangement includes the right of either party to dissolve it by mutual agreement after 1 year if the partnership proves unworkable. I believe fair arrangements should be honest about their limits. If you agree, I can be in Caldwell Flats within the month. E. Calloway. His third letter arrived in 4 days. 2 words. Agreed. G.M. She arrived in Caldwell Flats on a Thursday afternoon in October, and the first thing she noticed was that the town was watching her. Not politely watching the way people watch a newcomer with idle curiosity, but watching the way a crowd watches something they expect to be interesting. She stepped off the freight wagon with her trunk and her traveling bag, and she felt the weight of it immediately. 2 women on the boardwalk stopped their conversation mid-word. A man leaning against the post outside the general store straightened up. A boy of about 12 stopped sweeping and stared without any pretense of subtlety. Eliza did not look away from any of them. She had learned years ago that looking away was an invitation for people to fill in whatever story they preferred. She looked back calmly and let them wonder. She spotted Garrett Masterson before he moved toward her, because he was the only person in the immediate vicinity who was not watching her. He was standing slightly apart from the small crowd that had gathered, arms crossed, looking at something down the street with the focused inattention of a man who is deliberately not performing interest. He was broader than she had imagined, not just physically, though he was that too, but in the way he occupied space, like he had simply decided that this particular stretch of Wyoming territory belonged to him and had never thought to question it since. He turned when her trunk hit the ground. Their eyes met across maybe 20 feet of dusty Main Street. He walked toward her without hurry. "Miss Calloway," he said. Not a question. "Mr. Masterson," she said back. He looked at her for a moment, not the up-and-down assessment she had been braced for, but something more direct, more measuring. Like he was reading the letter she'd sent him, checking it against the person standing in front of him. "You're younger than I expected," he said. "You're quieter than I expected," she replied. Something shifted in his expression. Not a smile, not quite, but a recalibration. He picked up her trunk without asking and started toward a wagon at the far end of the street. "Come on then," he said. She followed. The ride out to Broken Spur took 40 minutes, and Garrett Masterson said approximately 15 words during it, not counting 2 brief exchanges with his horse when it shied at something along the road. Eliza used the silence to watch the land, to take the measure of what she was walking into. The ranch itself was not what the word broken suggested. It was large and functional, the kind of property that had been built by serious work over a serious number of years. She could see the care in the fence lines, in the state of the outbuildings, in the quality of the livestock she glimpsed as they pulled through the gate. Whatever Garrett Masterson's failings were, neglect was apparently not among them. A woman named Pearl met them at the main house, older, with the permanently suspicious expression of someone who had been proved right about people too many times. She was the housekeeper Garrett explained briefly, and had been at Broken Spur for 11 years. Pearl looked Eliza over with the same frank assessment Garrett had given her, except Pearl's included considerably more skepticism. "You're the one from the letters," Pearl said. It was not a welcoming statement. "I am," Eliza said. "He told me you were practical." "I am that too." Pearl made a sound that indicated she would reserve judgment. Then she showed Eliza to a room at the end of the upstairs hall, told her dinner was at 6, and that she'd best not be late because Pearl didn't rewarm food for anyone, and left her alone. Eliza set her trunk at the foot of the narrow bed and stood very still for a moment. She had made it. Whatever happened next, whatever this arrangement became or failed to become, she had made it out. She was standing on land that no one in her family knew about, in a town where no one knew her name before today, with a man who had offered her something real and asked for something real in return. She had not cried since Nebraska. She did not cry now. She unpacked her trunk instead, hung her 2 good dresses, carefully set her account books on the small writing desk by the window, and went downstairs for dinner at exactly 6 o'clock. So, the meal was the first real test. Pearl served roast beef and potatoes and said nothing. Garrett sat at the head of the table and said very little. Eliza sat to his right and used the silence to pay attention. She noticed the account ledger sitting on the sideboard, the kind of placement that meant it was always nearby, always being consulted, never quite put away. She noticed the careful but slightly worn state of the furniture, the quality of the original craftsmanship against the signs of deferred replacement. She noticed that Garrett poured himself exactly 1 glass of whiskey after Pearl cleared the plates and nursed it slowly, not drinking, just holding it the way a man holds something he needs to have within reach. "The legal situation," she said finally, because silence was only useful when it was gathering information, and she had gathered enough. "Tell me about the deed complication." Garrett looked up from the middle distance he'd been studying. "My father acquired the eastern pasture acreage in 1871 under a joint deed with a man named Hollis," he said. "Hollis died in 1879 without heirs. The county has been trying to reclaim that land for 3 years on a technicality. The deed requires an heir or a spouse signature to transfer cleanly to sole ownership. My lawyer says if I have a wife by December 1st, the transfer is straightforward. If I don't, the county takes 40% of the eastern acreage, and I don't have enough range to run the herd at capacity." "How much is the eastern acreage worth?" he told her. She worked the number in her head. "And without it, the ranch still operates. At a loss for 2 to 3 years while I restructure, maybe longer." "Has anyone else come forward to contest the Hollis claim?" He was quiet for a moment. "A man named Crenshaw has been sniffing around. He's not a local. He came in about 8 months ago with a surveyor and a lot of questions about property lines." "What kind of man is Crenshaw?" "The kind who buys debt," Garrett said flatly, "and then buys land." Eliza filed that away. "All right," she said. "Show me the full ledger tomorrow, and the deed documents." He looked at her again with that same recalibrating expression she'd seen on the street. "You don't waste time." "The problem won't wait," she said, "so neither do I." Yum. The next morning, she had the ledger open on the kitchen table before Pearl started the coffee. It was not good reading. Broken Spur was not drowning. Garrett had been too careful for that, but it was in the kind of slow accumulating difficulty that feels manageable from the inside until it suddenly isn't. 3 consecutive dry summers had reduced the herd count. A feed supply contract had been renegotiated at worse terms 2 years running. There was a note with the Caldwell Flats Bank that had been rolled over twice the interest, compounding quietly in the background like something growing in the dark. And now, Crenshaw. Eliza spent 3 hours with the ledger, making her own notes in the margins of the small notebook she kept in her apron pocket. When Garrett came in from the morning work, she had 4 questions ready. He leaned against the doorframe rather than sitting down, which she was beginning to understand was his version of defensive posture, not hostile, just unwilling to commit to a conversation he hadn't chosen yet. "Who negotiated the current banknote terms?" she asked. "I did." "Did you have a lawyer present?" "I am not in the habit of paying for a lawyer every time I have a business conversation." "You should be," she said without looking up from the ledger. "When the man across the table from you is the brother-in-law of the county commissioner." A beat of silence. "How do you know that?" "Pearl told me this morning. She doesn't mean to be helpful. It comes out anyway." She finally looked up at him. "The note terms are bad, Mr. Masterson. Not catastrophically, but bad enough that whoever set them understood exactly what they were doing. The rate is 1.5 above what I've seen on comparable ranch notes in the territorial press. That difference compounded over 3 years is not an accident." He was very still in the doorway. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying someone has been positioning to take a piece of broken spur for longer than 8 months, she said. "Crenshaw may be new in town, but the groundwork for his arrival was laid earlier. The banknote, the county deed issue, these things don't happen in isolation." Garrett came away from the doorframe then. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. His expression was controlled, but something behind it had shifted into something harder and more focused. "Say the rest of it," he said quietly. "I need to see the original Hollis deed documents," Eliza said. "And I need the name of your lawyer." "Harmon. Thomas Harmon." "How long has he represented the ranch?" 6 years. "Who introduced him to you?" The silence this time was different. She watched Garrett Masterson work through the question the way a man works through something he has been deliberately not looking at. "Harmon came recommended," he said slowly, "by the bank." Eliza set her pen down. She said nothing. She let the weight of what he'd just said sit in the air between them and do its own work. He looked at her for a long moment. "You figured this out in one morning?" "I had a good ledger and a talkative housekeeper," she said. "Pearl hasn't talked to anyone in 6 years." "She talked to me for 40 minutes over coffee," Eliza said. "People talk when they feel like the other person is actually listening." She folded her hands on the ledger. "Mr. Masterson Garrett, someone has been quietly constructing a trap around this ranch. I don't know yet how far it goes or who's at the center of it, but I know what I'm looking at in these numbers, and I know that the wedding needs to happen soon, not just for the deed, but because legally, once we're married, certain protections attach to jointly held property that make it considerably harder to extract through debt collection. You want to move up the wedding. I want to move up the wedding." He said nothing for a moment. Then he picked up his hat from the table beside him and turned it in his hands once. "The preacher comes to Caldwell Flats on Sundays," he said. "That's 4 days. 4 days is enough. You're very certain about things," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It sounded more like someone noting an unfamiliar weather pattern trying to decide whether to trust the forecast. "I'm certain about numbers," she said. "Numbers don't have feelings. They just tell you what's true." He stood. He picked up his hat. He moved toward the door, then stopped. "The 4 words," he said. "The ones I said in my last letter. You knew that wasn't going to be enough." She looked at him steadily. "Agreed. GM. I knew it was a beginning," she said. "I was prepared to work with that." He went out without responding. But she noticed, and she noticed everything that he had not told her. The following 3 days moved faster than anything she had experienced in years. She wrote 2 letters that afternoon, one to the Territorial Land Office, requesting a copy of the original Hollis deed filing, and one to a lawyer in Cheyenne whose name she had found in the Territorial Gazette, a man named Aldridge, who specialized in property disputes, and who critically had no connection to Caldwell Flats that she could find. She sent them with a ranch hand named Denny, who asked no questions, accepted the extra $1 she offered for fast delivery, and rode out without ceremony. Pearl watched her write both letters from the doorway of the kitchen with an expression that had migrated from suspicion toward something more neutral. "You're not what I expected," Pearl said. "What did you expect? Someone who needed things explained to her." Eliza sealed the second envelope. "I find I learn faster when no one explains," she said. "People explain things in the way they want them understood. The thing itself is usually clearer." Pearl said nothing to that, but she poured Eliza a second cup of coffee without being asked, which Eliza quietly catalogued as progress. Guys. On the second day, Garrett took her out to the eastern pasture to show her what was actually at stake, and for the first time since she arrived, she felt the weight of the land rather than just the weight of the numbers. She did not tell him that. She walked the fence line with him in the cold October air and listened to him talk about the herd rotation schedule and the water access points and the grazing patterns his father had developed. And she asked questions that were practical and specific, and she watched how he talked about the land when he thought she was only focused on the mechanics of it. He loved this land. Not in a romantic way, not the way people talked about love in the novels she had borrowed from the Hearts Crossing lending library. He loved it in the way a carpenter loves a well-made joint, or a navigator loves a clear star reading. He loved it because it was something he understood completely and had given everything to, that she thought was worth understanding. "What happens," she said as they turned back toward the fence gate, "if you lose the eastern acreage?" "I survive," he said immediately. "I've run the numbers. I take the loss, restructure, probably sell the Hendricks water rights to cover the banknote, and come back in 3 years. But," he was quiet for a step or two, "my father bought that land for 40 cents an acre in a drought year because no one else believed it was worth buying. He turned it into the best grazing land in the county in 8 years. If the county takes it on a legal technicality engineered by a man like Crenshaw—" He stopped. "Say it," she said. "That would not be something I could accept," he said quietly. She heard everything in the word except that he left out of the sentence around it. "Then we make sure it doesn't happen," she said. He looked at her sideways as they walked. "You've been here 3 days. "The problem didn't wait for me to get comfortable," she said. "So neither did I." He looked away again, but she caught it just at the edge of his expression before he controlled it back into stillness. He had almost smiled. Sunday came. They stood in the front room of the Broken Spur main house with the traveling preacher, whose name was Reverend Cole, and who smelled faintly of horses and cedar and pearl as the witness, and they said what needed to be said. Garrett's voice was even and clear. Eliza's was steady. When it was done, Reverend Cole offered his congratulations with the practiced warmth of a man who performed these proceedings frequently under a wide variety of circumstances and had learned not to ask questions. Pearl signed the witness line on the marriage document with a pen she held like it had personally offended her. Garrett Masterson signed his name. Eliza signed hers. Eliza Masterson, for the first time in her clear accountant's hand. She felt the weight of it settle over her. Not oppressive, nothing like the weight she had been carrying since Nebraska, since before Nebraska, since the years of being told she was too old and too much, and not enough all at the same time. This weight was different. This was the weight of something real. Garrett handed the signed document to Reverend Cole without ceremony, and the Reverend tucked it into his coat pocket, and that was that. Pearl went to the kitchen. The Reverend went to his horse, and Eliza and Garrett were left standing in the front room of Broken Spur Ranch, legally married on a Sunday morning in October, 2 people who had exchanged exactly 3 letters and 11 days of careful observation. He turned to look at her. She looked back. "Well," he said. It was not quite a question and not quite a statement. "Well," she agreed. "I'll be in the barn," he said. "The north fence needs work." "I'll have the Aldridge letter ready to send by noon," she said. "The one about Crenshaw. I need you to read it before it goes." He nodded. He went to the barn. She went to the writing desk. And Pearl from the kitchen doorway watched them both go and made a sound that if you were paying attention, if you were the kind of person who noticed things, was not entirely disapproving. Outside somewhere across the eastern pasture that Garrett Masterson had married her to protect, the autumn wind moved through the grass in long, slow waves. Eliza picked up her pen. She had work to do. The letter to Aldridge went out Monday morning, and by Monday afternoon, Caldwell Flats already knew that Garrett Masterson had gotten himself a wife. Eliza knew because Pearl told her, and Pearl told her because the feed store owner's wife had come to the back door under the pretense of returning a borrowed pan and had spent 11 minutes in the kitchen asking questions that circled the subject without ever landing on it directly. Pearl had answered exactly none of them, which Eliza suspected was Pearl's highest form of loyalty. "She'll have it all over town by supper," Pearl said, setting the pan on the shelf with the particular force of someone who finds people exhausting. "Let her," Eliza said. She was already back at the account books. "The sooner Crenshaw knows I'm here, the sooner I find out what he does next." Pearl stopped moving. "You want him to know?" "I want to see how he reacts to an obstacle he didn't plan for," Eliza said. "A man who builds a trap tells you everything about himself the moment he realizes the trap has someone in it who can read the mechanism." Pearl looked at her for a long moment. "You're going to cause trouble," she said finally. "No," Eliza said, turning a page. "I'm going to find the trouble that's already here and make it visible. That's different." Pearl picked up her dishcloth and went back to the sink. She said, which Eliza had already begun to understand was Pearl's way of conceding a point she wasn't ready to concede out loud. Garrett came in from the range at midday, and Eliza met him at the door with 3 pieces of paper, which was apparently not what he had expected, because he stopped and looked at her with the slightly braced expression of a man who is recalibrating his expectations of what coming home means. "The first is the revised breakdown of the banknote," she said. "I found something." He took the papers. He did not sit down. He read, standing up, which she had learned was how he read anything he considered important, like sitting down, would make him less ready to respond to whatever the paper said. "This number," he said, pointing to a figure on the second page. "This isn't right." "It's exactly right," she said. "That's the problem. When the note was rolled over in March, the interest was recalculated on the full outstanding balance, including the previously accrued interest, but the documentation records it as simple interest on the original principal. The difference is $340. He looked up. "Harmon reviewed this rollover." "I know. You're telling me my own lawyer missed $340. "I'm telling you your own lawyer may not have missed it," she said. "I'm telling you the number doesn't match the documentation in a way that benefits the bank and harms you, and that Harmon's signature is on the review sheet." The silence that followed had a particular quality to it, the quality of a man who is doing hard arithmetic that has nothing to do with money. "I've known Tom Harmon for 6 years, Garrett said. His voice was controlled, but the control was working harder than usual. "I know," Eliza said again. She kept her voice even because this was not a moment for anything other than precision. "I'm not telling you what to do with that information. I'm telling you the information exists." He set the papers down on the table. He put both hands flat on the surface and looked at them. Then he looked up at her. "What do you need from me?" he asked. The question surprised her, not because it was wrong, but because it was so exactly right. She had expected resistance or a demand that she explain herself further, or the particular kind of male pride that insists on being the one to arrive at a conclusion rather than being handed it. She had not expected immediate practical capitulation to the reality of the situation. "I need you to go to the bank this week," she said. "Not to confront anyone, just a routine visit asked to review your note terms in person. Be cordial. I need to know whether they offer to revise the number or whether they try to explain it away. You want to see if they think you've found it. I want to see if they already know someone has." She paused. And I need you to say nothing to Harmon. Not yet." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he picked up his hat. "I'll go Thursday," he said. Tuesday brought the first snow of the season, thin and early and gone by afternoon, but cold enough to remind everyone in Caldwell Flats what was coming. It also brought a visitor. Eliza was at the writing desk when Pearl appeared in the doorway with the expression of someone delivering news they find personally offensive. "There's a man at the front," Pearl said. "Says his name is Crenshaw. Says he heard about the wedding and came to offer congratulations." Eliza set down her pen. She arranged her papers into a neat stack face down. She straightened her collar. All of this took perhaps 15 seconds. "Show him to the front room," she said. "Tell him Mr. Masterson is on the range and is not expected back for some time. Then, bring coffee." Pearl's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're going to see him alone?" "I'm going to let him think he has an advantage," Eliza said. "That's the fastest way to find out what he wants." Pearl went. Eliza gave it 30 seconds, then walked to the front room. Crenshaw was not what she had assembled in her mind from the account books and Garrett's brief description. She had built a picture of something angular and cold, a man shaped like a legal document. What she found was softer, well-dressed, perhaps 45, with the practiced warmth of someone who had learned that charm was a business tool and had put in the work to master it. He stood when she entered. He smiled. Both things were deliberate. "Mrs. Masterson," he said, "what a pleasure. I hope I haven't called at an inconvenient time." "Not at all," she said. She sat without offering her hand, which in her experience was a good way to establish, without saying anything, who was setting the terms of a conversation. "My husband sends his apologies. The early snow brought some fence concerns." Of course. He sat when she did, which told her he had good instincts for social cues, meaning he would notice the ones she sent deliberately. "I won't impose long. I simply wanted to welcome you to Caldwell Flats personally. It's a small community. We like to know our neighbors." "That's very kind," she said. Pearl appeared with coffee, set it down without looking at either of them, and disappeared. "Have you been in Caldwell Flats long, Mr. Crenshaw?" 8 months or so." He accepted the coffee. "I came up from Denver. Business opportunities in the territory have been considerable." "What kind of business?" "Land and finance primarily." He said it easily, like it was nothing. "I work with parties in the East who are interested in Western investment. It's an exciting time for Wyoming, the railroad, the territorial push for statehood. There's real opportunity here." "For those positioned to take advantage of it," Eliza said pleasantly. Something moved behind his eyes. Just a flicker, quick as a fish changing direction underwater. "Exactly so. And I understand Broken Spur is quite an established operation. Your husband has built something impressive." "He has," she agreed. "We're very proud of it." "We." She placed the word deliberately and watched him register it. "I wonder," he said, setting his coffee down, "whether Mr. Masterson has given much thought to the land management challenges in the eastern sector. I understand there are some complexities with the Hollis deed situation." There it was. Eliza kept her expression exactly where it was. Mild interest. Slight curiosity. Nothing else. "Every ranch has its complexities," she said. "That's why it helps to have someone keeping careful track of the documentation." Another flicker. "Of course. I only mention it because I work with parties who would be interested in acquiring certain acreage at a fair price naturally, if the legal situation made it preferable to a protracted county dispute. It would be a simple resolution for everyone." "That's very thoughtful," Eliza said. "I'll certainly mention it to my husband." She stood. The conversation was over. He knew it, and she watched him understand it, and she watched him absorb the fact that the meeting had not gone the way he had designed it. He rose, still smiling, still controlled, but the warmth had recalibrated into something more calculating. "I hope we'll see you both in town," he said. "The social life is modest but genuine." "I'm sure we'll be great friends," Eliza said. She walked him to the door. She waited until the sound of his horse faded down the road. Then she went back to the writing desk, picked up her pen, opened her notebook, and wrote 3 lines. He knows about the Hollis deed specifics more than a casual observer would. He mentioned the eastern sector by name. He has someone inside the county administration, or has had access to the deed documentation directly. Not just a speculator, an architect. She read what she had written. Then she added a 4th line. He did not expect a wife who reads. Garrett's reaction to her account of the Crenshaw visit was quieter than she expected, and quieter was more frightening. He listened to the whole of it without speaking. When she finished, he sat with it for a moment that stretched out long enough to make Pearl find something to do in the opposite end of the house. He knew about the eastern sector by name, Garrett said finally. Yes. That's not public information. No. The county deed filing is a public record, he said, working through it. But the specific language about the eastern sector acreage that's in the Hollis deed documentation, which I have a copy of, and Harmon has a copy of. And whoever Harmon may have shown it to, Eliza said. The silence this time was the kind that comes before a decision. I need to send a wire, Garrett said, to a man I knew in Cheyenne. He's not a lawyer, but he knows where things go when they're not where they're supposed to be. Good, Eliza said. Do it today before Thursday. He looked at her. You think the bank visit needs to come before the wire? I think you should know what you're walking into before you send signals that you know something, she said. Right now, whoever is watching Broken Spur has seen me here for a week. They don't know what I've found. Thursday, you walk into that bank as a man doing a routine review. You're not suspicious, you're just thorough. Watch how they treat thorough. Garrett studied her for a long moment. Where did you learn to think like this? From men who thought they were smarter than me, she said. They tend to be very clear about their strategies when they're not watching for a woman to be paying attention. Something shifted in his face, not the recalibration she'd seen before, and not almost smiling. Something deeper than either. Something that looked briefly like recognition. He went to send his wire. Wednesday. The letter came back from Aldridge in Cheyenne. It was not the letter she had expected. It was better and worse simultaneously, which in Eliza's experience was the signature quality of important information. Aldridge had done his research faster than she had anticipated, and what he had found was that the Hollis deed situation was not a simple county technicality. The original deed had a buried provision rarely invoked that allowed a third-party claimant to petition for a priority interest in disputed acreage if that party could demonstrate prior financial investment connected to the original property transaction. In plain language, if someone could prove they had put money into anything connected to the Hollis land deal back in 1871, they could cut ahead of the county's claim. Crenshaw Aldridge had discovered represented a Denver investment syndicate. A syndicate whose founding capital had included a loan made in 1870 to a land speculator who had briefly held an option on the acreage before Hollis bought it. It was thin. It was exactly thin enough to be dangerous. He's not just buying debt, Eliza said when Garrett read the letter, his jaw tightening with each paragraph. He's manufacturing a historical claim. He found a 60-year-old financial thread, and he's pulling it. Can he win? Garrett asked. With Harmon as your lawyer advising you not to look too closely at the fine print, she said. He has a reasonable chance. Without Harmon, with Aldridge with me, with the actual documentation, the claim falls apart. But it would take a fight. A public one. In front of a territorial judge. Garrett put the letter down. I cannot afford a legal fight. You cannot afford not to have one, she said. But you don't have to fund it alone. She turned to the 3rd page of Aldridge's letter. He says the Territorial Land Office in Cheyenne has been watching Crenshaw's syndicate for other deals. If we file a formal counter-complaint that documents the manipulation of the banknote, the deed claim, and Harmon's potential conflict of interest all together as a pattern, we are no longer a single rancher fighting a land grab. We're witnesses to a systematic fraud. Garrett was very still. We. he said. She heard the word land differently than she'd meant it. She met his gaze directly. We, she said. This is Broken Spur. I signed for it. He looked at her for a moment that lasted longer than the ones before it. Something was moving behind his eyes that was not calculation and was not analysis and was nothing she had a clean category for. Then he said, Aldridge, can he be in Caldwell Flats by next week? If we ask him, she said. Ask him. Thursday came, and Garrett went to the bank. He was gone for 2 hours. Eliza spent both hours at the writing desk not writing, just sitting with her pen in her hand, paying attention to the sound of the house around her. Pearl, moving in the kitchen. The wind across the eastern pasture. The particular quality of quiet that comes before something breaks. When she heard his horse, she did not go to the door. She waited. He came in, hung his coat, and sat down across from her at the writing desk. He looked like a man who has just received confirmation of something he already knew, but had hoped was wrong. They offered to revise the figure, he said. Before I even raised it. The bank manager, not Tillis, the one I usually deal with, but a man named Fowler. I've never seen before. He came out personally to greet me. Said there had been a computational adjustment and handed me a corrected statement. Eliza set her pen down. They knew I'd found it, she said. Before I walked in the door, Garrett said. Someone told them I was coming. The adjusted statement was already printed. The room was very quiet. Harmon, Garrett said. It was not a question anymore. Or someone Harmon spoke to. Eliza folded her hands. Did you accept the corrected statement? I thanked Fowler for the correction and said I'd have my lawyer review the updated documentation. She looked at him. You said that? It seemed like the right thing to say. Despite everything, she felt something that under other circumstances might have become a smile. That was exactly the right thing to say. You've just told them you have a lawyer who isn't Harmon without telling them you have a lawyer who isn't Harmon. For the first time since she'd arrived at Broken Spur, Garrett Masterson leaned back in his chair with something that looked like relief, not comfort, not ease, but the particular relief of a man who has been carrying a weight alone for a long time and has just realized concretely that the person across from him intends to carry it with him. You're very good at this, he said. I've had practice, she said. Men who think they're smarter than me remember. I don't think I'm smarter than you, he said. I decided that on the first morning. She looked at him. Something passed between them that was not the careful, practical language they had been speaking all week, something that had no name in the vocabulary of contracts and legal provisions and account books. It lasted only a moment. Then they both, by some mutual, unspoken agreement, returned to the work in front of them. But it had been there. She had noticed. She noticed everything. Friday evening, Pearl set the table for two without being asked and made a pot roast that had clearly required more effort than any pot roast in recent history, judging by the particular set of her shoulders when she brought it out. Eliza and Garrett sat across from each other as they had every night that week. But Friday was different, and they both knew it was different, and neither of them named it. They talked about the Aldridge visit, about the ranch hand roster, about the herd count, and the winter feed supply. They talked about practical things in practical language, and underneath all of it ran something that was becoming harder to ignore. Halfway through the meal, Garrett looked up from his plate and said, "Where did you go before Nebraska?" She was quiet for a moment. "Ohio originally. I grew up in a farming family east of Columbus." "What happened there?" "What happens in a lot of families," she said. "My father was not a kind man when things were hard, and things were frequently hard." Garrett looked at her steadily. He did not offer sympathy, which she appreciated. Sympathy would have made her feel managed. He simply looked at her as though what she had said was information he intended to take seriously. "The cut," he said. "When you arrived, above your left eye." She had thought he hadn't noticed. Yes. Your father. The last time, she said. I left the next morning. He said nothing. He held her gaze, and in the silence he gave her. Instead of words, she felt something she had not felt in so long. She had almost stopped believing it existed, the simple, uncomplicated weight of being seen without being judged for what the seeing found. I'm glad you answered the advertisement, he said finally. It was such a plain sentence. 4 words and then 6 more. Not poetic, not grand, just true. So am I, she said. Pearl came in to clear the plates and looked at both of them with an expression that for the first time contained no suspicion whatsoever. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Saturday. 2 things happened. The first, Denny came back from town with the news that Crenshaw had been seen at the county commissioner's office for the 2nd time that week, in a meeting that the commissioner's secretary later described to the post office clerk as lengthy and somewhat heated. The second, a wire arrived from Garrett's contact in Cheyenne, a man named Burrell, containing 4 sentences. Crenshaw's syndicate under investigation by Territorial Attorney Office since August. 3 similar land acquisitions in Colorado under scrutiny. Hollis deed claim is their 4th attempt at this play. Your new wife's letter to Aldridge started something bigger than your deed problem. Stay put. Help is coming. Garrett read the wire twice. Then he handed it to Eliza. She read it once. Your letter to Aldridge, he said. You didn't just file a counter-complaint. You triggered a territorial investigation. I described the full pattern, she said. I thought it was the accurate picture. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said something she had not expected. Eliza, he said. Not Miss Calloway or Mrs. Masterson or anything formal. Just her name, the first time he'd used it directly, and the sound of it in his voice was different from how she'd expected. Quieter, more careful. Thank you. She kept her expression calm. Inside, something shifted in a way she had no immediate category for. You hired me to be useful, she said. I didn't hire you, he said. I married you. The distinction hung in the air between them. Outside, the Saturday wind moved hard across the Wyoming plain, cold and uncompromising the way only the territory could be in October. Inside Broken Spur Ranch, in the warm and unglamorous kitchen of a working cattle operation that someone had spent a very long time trying to quietly steal 2 people who had arrived at this moment, through entirely practical means, sat with the growing and inconvenient awareness that something was happening between them that had very little to do with practical means at all. Eliza picked up the wire. I'll start the documentation for Aldridge, she said. I'll help, Garrett said. He pulled a chair to her side of the table. They went to work. Aldridge arrived on Monday with a leather satchel, a wool coat dusted from the road, and the kind of eyes that had spent a career reading documents other people hoped nobody would read carefully. He was younger than Eliza had pictured, mid-30s sharp, without being aggressive, the sort of man who could be underestimated in a room, and had probably learned to use that. He shook Garrett's hand at the door, looked at Eliza and said, You're the one who wrote the letter. I am, she said. That letter is going to matter considerably more than you know, he said. Then he came inside and got to work. They spent the better part of Monday at the kitchen table, Eliza, Garrett, and Aldridge, with every document she had assembled spread between them. The banknote, the rolled-over terms, the discrepancy in the interest calculation, the Hollis deed, the Burrell wire from Cheyenne, her own notes from the Crenshaw visit written out clean the night before, so they were readable by someone who wasn't inside her head. Aldridge read everything without comment for 40 minutes. Pearl refilled coffee twice. Nobody spoke. When he finally looked up, he said, Mrs. Masterson, have you done this kind of work before? Not exactly this kind, she said. Close to it. I've managed accounts for people who were being slowly robbed and didn't know it, she said. The mechanism changes. The pattern doesn't. Aldridge looked at Garrett. You understand what your wife has found here. I'm beginning to, Garrett said. It's not just the Crenshaw claim, Aldridge said, turning back to the papers. The banknote irregularity. Harmon's conflict of interest, the timing of Crenshaw's arrival relative to when your loan was first rolled over, this is coordinated. Someone decided 18 months ago that Broken Spur was the target. The Hollis deed situation didn't create the opportunity. They found the deed situation and built the strategy around it. The kitchen was very quiet. Who? Garrett said. That's what we're going to find out, Aldridge said. He looked at Eliza. The territorial attorney's office contacted me this morning before I left Cheyenne. They want everything you've documented. They're going to move on the syndicate, but they need a clean chain of evidence. No gaps, no assumptions, everything sourced. How long? Eliza asked. 2 weeks to build the file. Then a hearing before a territorial judge. He paused. In the meantime, you need to understand that Crenshaw will know something is moving against him. Men like Crenshaw don't sit still when they feel a situation changing. What does he do? Garrett asked. He accelerates, Aldridge said. He files the claim before we can counter it. He calls in favors. He applies pressure anywhere he thinks pressure will create movement. Garrett's jaw set. The banknote. That would be my first guess, Aldridge said. If the bank calls the note early. On what grounds? Eliza said immediately. They'll find grounds, Aldridge said. Or manufacture them. Eliza was already turning pages. The note agreement has a 60-day notice provision before any acceleration clause can be invoked. I read it last week. Aldridge looked at her. You read the original note document. I read everything in this house with numbers in it, she said. The 60-day provision requires written notice delivered by a county officer. If they try to accelerate without that notice, the note is in default by the bank, not by Garrett. A silence. Then Aldridge said very carefully, Mrs. Masterson, what did you do before you came here? I survived, she said simply. It turns out that requires a lot of the same skills. Aldridge stayed through dinner and rode back toward Caldwell Flats before dark to send his wires. He left Eliza with a list of 3 additional documents she needed to locate in the county records office, which she could access as a property holder's spouse with a written request. Garrett walked Aldridge out and came back to find Eliza already writing the request letters. He thinks you're remarkable, Garrett said. He thinks I'm useful, she said without looking up. Those aren't the same thing. He said remarkable, Garrett said. I heard him. She looked up then. Garrett was leaning against the doorframe, his usual posture, but there was something different in it tonight. Less defensive. More like a man who simply wants to be in the room where something is happening. The county records office, she said. Can I take the wagon tomorrow? I'll take you, he said. You don't need to. I want to, he said. It was the first time in 2 weeks she had heard him use that word in relation to anything involving her. She held his gaze for a moment. All right, she said. She went back to her letters. But she was aware in the way she was always aware of things she filed carefully away that something in the temperature of the room had shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would have registered on a thermometer. Just enough to notice if you were the kind of person who noticed. Tuesday at the county records office was its own kind of battle. The clerk, a small dry man named Fitch, who looked like he had been behind that desk since before Wyoming was a territory and intended to remain there until he personally decided to stop, greeted them with the specific warmth of a man who does not welcome visits that require him to find things. Eliza handed him her written request. He read it. He looked at her. He looked at Garrett. He looked at the request again. These files are in archive storage, he said. Retrieval takes 3 to 5 business days. I understand, Eliza said pleasantly. I'll wait. Fitch blinked. I said 3 to 5 days. And I said I'll wait, she said. I'm happy to sign whatever retrieval form you need. I'll sit right here. She indicated the bench along the wall. Please take your time. The clerk looked at Garrett, who offered him nothing. No help, no expression. Just the patient stillness of a man who had apparently decided that his wife was handling this, and his job was to be large and present in the background, which he was doing effectively. Fitch found the files in 40 minutes. Eliza went through them at the clerk's counter, which Fitch clearly found personally offensive. She took her time. She made notes. She requested 2 specific pages be copied at the county's standard fee, which she paid in exact change from the small purse she'd brought precisely for this purpose. In the wagon on the way home, Garrett said, "How did you know he'd find them faster if you said you'd wait? Because people who stall by citing process are almost always hoping you'll leave and make the problem go away," she said. "The moment you commit to staying, the process speeds up considerably." He was quiet for a moment. "You've dealt with a lot of people who stall." "My whole life," she said. "Men who say things will take time when what they mean is they'd prefer you didn't look at all." He drove. The road back to Broken Spur was cold and straight and empty. "The cut above your eye," Garrett said. "You said he was the last time. How many times before that?" She hadn't expected him to return to it. She was quiet for long enough that a less patient man would have filled the silence with an apology for asking. Garrett did not fill the silence. He drove and waited. "Enough times that I stopped counting," she said. "Enough times that I knew how to judge by the sound of his footsteps whether it was going to be a bad night." Garrett's hands tightened on the reins. She noticed. "I didn't tell you that for sympathy," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm just—" He stopped, started again. "I'm angry on behalf of the person you were then. That's allowed, isn't it? Being angry at something that happened to someone before you knew them." She looked at the road ahead. Her throat felt unexpectedly tight in a way she did not welcome and did not know what to do with. "I think that's allowed," she said finally. They drove the rest of the way in silence. But it was a different kind of silence from the one they'd had on the first ride out from town 3 weeks ago. That silence had been 2 strangers being careful with each other. This one was 2 people who had decided without ever saying so directly that careful was no longer the primary requirement. The copied pages from the county records contained what Eliza had suspected since reading Aldridge's letter. The Hollis deed had been filed with a secondary annotation, a single paragraph added in 1873, 2 years after the original filing that referenced the syndicate loan from 1870. The annotation was in a different hand from the original document. It had been added after the fact. Someone had altered the county record. She stared at that paragraph for a long time. Then she walked to the front room where Garrett was going over the herd numbers and set the copied page in front of him. "Read the paragraph marked in the margin," she said. He read it. He read it again. He looked up. "That wasn't in the original," he said. "No," she said. "How do you know?" "The ink is different," she said. "And the handwriting. But more than that, the original filing ledger date stamps each entry. This paragraph's ink density doesn't match a 1873 edition. It's newer than that, significantly newer." She paused. "Someone added this annotation in the last 2 years." Garrett set the paper down very deliberately. Someone falsified a county record. To create the historical claim Crenshaw's syndicate needed, she said. Without this annotation, their 1870 loan has no legal connection to the Hollis deed. With it, they have standing to petition. Who had access to the county records? She looked at him steadily. The county commissioner's office, the county clerk, and any attorney with a filing matter connected to the Hollis property. She paused to let that settle. Harmon filed Garrett's deed review petition 18 months ago. It was a routine filing. It would have required access to the original Hollis record. The moment stretched out long and ugly between them. "He put it there," Garrett said. His voice had gone very flat. "I don't know that for certain yet," Eliza said. "But it's the most direct line between access and outcome." She sat down across from him. "Garrett, this is no longer a property dispute. This is fraud on a county record. That's criminal, not civil." He was absolutely still. She had seen him in many states over the past 3 weeks, controlled, calculating, almost warm tight with anger, but this was different. This was a man confronting the specific personal betrayal of someone he had trusted in a context where trust was the whole foundation of the arrangement. 6 years, he said. He's been my lawyer for 6 years. I know, she said. He came to my father's funeral. She said nothing. There was nothing useful to say to that. He stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there for a minute with his back to her, and she let him have the minute, because it was his, and he had earned it. Then he turned around. His face was controlled again, but differently controlled. Not closed off, not shut down, but focused the way a man focuses when he has stopped grieving something and started deciding what to do about it. Send everything to Aldridge tonight, he said. The copied pages, your analysis, all of it. Already written, she said. I just need you to read it before it goes. Something moved in his expression that had nothing to do with strategy. Of course it is, he said quietly. You already wrote it. I was waiting to show you the document first, she said. It's your ranch. You make the decisions. It's our ranch, he said. You signed for it. She had said those words to him 2 weeks ago. Hearing them returned now, and his voice landed differently than she had expected. Then you review the letter, she said, and we send it together. He read the letter. He changed 2 words not for accuracy, but for force. She agreed with both changes. They signed it together, her name alongside his, and Denny rode out with it before dark. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of bad news that doesn't knock before it enters. Denny came back from town at 8 in the morning instead of the afternoon, which told Eliza the news before he opened his mouth. There's talk, he said, pulling up short in the doorway, hat in hand. The feed store, the saloon, both places saying the same thing. What thing? Garrett said. Denny looked uncomfortable in the specific way of a man delivering information he wishes he didn't have. Crenshaw put a notice in the weekly paper, filed a formal claim with the county on the Hollis acreage. Says he has historical documentation supporting a prior investment interest. He paused. And he stopped. Say it, Garrett said. He told 2 people at the saloon last night that the Broken Spur banknote is in default, that the bank called it, that Garrett Masterson can't pay. Denny looked at the floor. It's going around. The room was completely still. Then Eliza said, Did he say the bank called the note or that it's in default? Denny looked up, surprised by the precision of the question. Both. He said both. Those are different claims, she said. She turned to Garrett. If the bank called the note, they had to issue written notice 60 days prior. If there is no written notice on file, the note has not been legally called. Crenshaw is spreading a rumor in advance of a legal action he hasn't been able to execute yet. Why? Garrett said. Because if people believe the ranch is already in financial distress, she said, it becomes easier to argue that your legal position is desperate. A desperate man takes bad settlement offers. He's creating the appearance of pressure to manufacture the reality of it. Garrett looked at her for a moment. He's lying about the note. Until we verify, she said. I believe he's lying about the note. But we need the bank's written records today, not tomorrow. She was already reaching for her coat. I'll go into town. Eliza, Garrett started. I'm your wife, she said. I have legal standing to request documentation on any account in which I'm a co-signer, which I am as of last Sunday for all purposes involving jointly held property. She buttoned her coat. Let me do this. He looked at her for one long moment. Then he said, Take Denny with you. I don't need, not for protection, he said, because you shouldn't walk into that bank alone and have them claim afterward that you were never there. Denny's a witness. She stopped. That's yes. That's right. She looked at him. Good thinking. I've been watching how you think, he said. I'm learning. The bank was the kind of battle that happens in quiet voices across a polished counter, which in some ways is harder than the kind that raises voices. The manager Fowler, again the one who had appeared with the corrected statement the week before, greeted her with the professional warmth that was his apparent standard and asked how he could assist Mrs. Masterson. "I'd like to see the written notice of acceleration on our account," she said. "The 60-day notice, the one that was delivered by a county officer." Fowler's professional warmth adjusted by a fraction of a degree. "I'm not sure I follow the question." "We've heard a report that our note has been called," she said pleasantly. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, but naturally, I want to review the official documentation. The notice would have been delivered in the last several weeks, per the terms of the note agreement." "Mrs. Masterson, I don't believe any such notice has been issued." "Then I'd like a signed statement from the bank confirming that no acceleration notice has been issued, and that the note is current in good standing," she said. "For our records, given the rumors circulating, I think that's a reasonable request." Fowler looked at her. He looked at Denny, who was standing 2 steps behind her, being very large and very patient. He looked at Eliza again. "I'll need to speak with—" "I'll wait," she said. She indicated the bench along the wall, the same thing she'd said to Fitch at the county office. Same bench, different building. Same principle. It took 22 minutes. Then Fowler returned with a signed statement on bank letterhead, confirming that the Masterson Ranch note was current in good standing and that no acceleration notice had been issued. She read the entire statement in front of him. Then she folded it, put it in her bag, and said, "Thank you for your time." She was out the door before Fowler had a chance to rearrange his expression into something less like a man who has just been outmaneuvered by a woman who arrived in town 3 weeks ago. Denny, walking behind her, said nothing until they were at the wagon. Then he said, "Ma'am, I've worked for Mr. Masterson for 4 years." "I know," she said, climbing up. "I've never seen anybody do what you just did in there," he said. "I just asked for a piece of paper," she said. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "That's what I mean." She was back at Broken Spur by noon with the bank statement, and she set it on the table in front of Garrett without preamble. He read it. He looked up. "He lied," Garrett said. "Publicly and specifically," she said. "We now have a signed bank statement contradicting his claim. That statement goes to Aldridge today. Combined with the falsified county record, Crenshaw has just made himself significantly more legally vulnerable than he was yesterday." "He doesn't know we have the county record copy," Garrett said. "No," she said. "He thinks he's accelerating. He doesn't know he's already in the trap." Garrett sat back. He looked at her the way he'd looked at her a handful of times. Now that deep considering look that she had learned was not assessment anymore. Not the original measuring, the letter against the person calculation from their first meeting. It was something else. Something she was running out of neutral language to describe. "Eliza," he said. "The letter to Aldridge," she said, because she needed to stay on solid ground, and the way he said her name was making solid ground difficult to locate. "We should—" "In a minute," he said. "I want to say something first." She waited. "When I put that advertisement in the paper," he said, "I was not looking for a partner. I want you to understand that. I was looking for a solution to a legal problem. I was looking for someone competent and practical who would fulfill the terms of an arrangement and ask no more of me than I asked of them." He paused. "I am telling you this because I want to be honest with you, the same way you have been honest with me from the first letter." "I understand," she said carefully. "I don't think you do," he said. "Because what I'm trying to say is that I was wrong about what I was looking for. Not wrong that I needed someone competent, but wrong that competent was going to be enough." He stopped, looked at her directly in the way he did when he was about to say something he had decided to commit to. "I was wrong, and I think you deserve to know that I know I was wrong." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the wind moved across the pasture in long, cold currents, and somewhere distant, a cow called, and all of it felt very far away from this table and these two people, and the thing that was sitting between them that neither of them had named yet. "Garrett," she said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "You don't have to say anything," he said. I needed you to know." She looked at him for a long moment, at the broad, careful, stubborn, slowly opening face of a man who had spent years deciding that practical was the safest mode of operation, and was now one honest sentence at a time revising that decision. "I think," she said slowly, "that what I was looking for when I answered that advertisement was also not what I thought I was looking for." He was very still. "I thought I was looking for safety," she said. "A legal arrangement. A fair wage. Ground that wasn't going to shift under me." She looked down at her folded hands, then back up. "I was not expecting to find someone worth fighting for." The silence that followed that sentence was the longest and the most complete she had ever sat inside. Then Pearl walked in from the back hallway, stopped dead, looked at both of them and said, "The letter to Aldridge isn't going to write itself." She turned around and walked back out. Eliza picked up her pen. Garrett pulled his chair to her side of the table. For the third time since she had arrived at Broken Spur, they sat side by side and worked toward the same horizon. But this time something had shifted in the architecture of the arrangement, something foundational, something that the original letters had not included, and the contract had not specified, and the law had not required. Something that had grown anyway in the particular way that real things grow, without announcement, without permission, and without any intention of stopping. The letter to Aldridge went out that afternoon. The bank statement went with it. The copied county record pages went with it. By Friday morning, Aldridge sent back a single wire. Territorial attorney filing formal fraud charges. Monday, county commissioner's office under investigation. Do not speak to Harmon. Do not speak to anyone at the bank. Keep Mrs. Masterson close. She is the clearest witness we have. This is going to break open. Garrett read the wire at the kitchen table. He read it a second time. Then he looked up at Eliza, who was reading over his shoulder, and said, "Keep Mrs. Masterson close." "Those are Aldridge's instructions," she said. "I'm aware," he said. He folded the wire. He did not hand it back to her. "I intend to follow them." She looked at him. He looked at her. And in the small, warm, completely unglamorous kitchen of a working cattle ranch in Wyoming Territory on a Friday morning in October, with fraud charges about to break open across the county, and winter coming on fast, and a legal fight not yet finished, Eliza Masterson allowed herself carefully and deliberately, and with full awareness of what she was doing, to feel something she had not felt in so long. She had nearly stopped believing she was capable of it. Safe. She felt safe. Not because the danger was over. It wasn't. Not because the fight was won. It wasn't yet. But because the man sitting across from her had told her the truth about himself, and listened to the truth about her, and pulled his chair to her side of the table and stayed there. That she had learned was the only kind of safety that was real. She picked up her pen. There was still work to do. The Monday that Aldridge had promised arrived with the particular weight of a day that knows what it carries. Eliza was up before Pearl, which had become her habit over the past weeks. The early hours were the clearest before the ranch came alive around her, and the day's demands started pulling her attention in multiple directions at once. She made her own coffee, sat at the writing desk, and went through her notes one final time. Everything was documented. Everything was sourced. The falsified county record annotation, the banknote discrepancy, the timeline of Harmon's involvement, the Crenshaw visit and what he had said and what he had not said, the signed bank statement contradicting his public claim, Burrell's wire from Cheyenne, Aldridge's 3 letters, 42 pages of notes in her small, precise hand. She read them through not because she needed to, she had them memorized, but because the act of reading something you have built is different from the act of building it. It lets you see the whole shape at once, the way you can't see it when you're inside the construction. The shape, she decided, was solid. What happened next depended on a territorial judge and the speed of a legal process she could document but not control. That was the part she was least comfortable with. the part where she had done everything she could do, and now had to wait for other people to do their part correctly. Garrett came into the kitchen at 6, found her at the desk with 42 pages and an empty coffee cup, and refilled the cup without being asked. He set it beside her hand and looked at the pages. "You've been up since 4, he said. "Since 3:30, she said. He sat down across from her, not at his usual remove directly across, close enough that she was aware of him in the particular way she had been increasingly and inconveniently aware of him since the conversation 5 days ago that neither of them had directly revisited and both of them were clearly still carrying. "Tell me what you're worried about," he said. "I'm not worried," she said. He looked at her with the calm patience of a man who has learned to read the distance between what she says and what she means. "Tell me what you're thinking about at 3:30 in the morning then." She put down her pen. "Harmon," she said, "Aldridge is filing today, and the territorial attorney is moving on the syndicate, and the county record falsification is documented, but Harmon is the weak point in all of it. Everything else connects through him, if he has documentation we haven't seen, or if he's moved anything in the last week." She stopped. "You think he knows?" Garrett said. "I think someone told him," she said. "The same way someone told the bank you were coming on Thursday. There is a communication line running through this that we've been working around, but we haven't found it." She looked at him directly. Who else knows about Aldridge beyond the people in this house and Burrell? Garrett thought. She watched him think. "Denny knows I hired a Cheyenne lawyer," he said slowly. "I didn't tell him the name." "Who did Denny talk to?" "Denny doesn't." He stopped, started again. "Denny has a girl in town. The Tillis daughter." The Tillis name landed in the room with a quiet but unmistakable weight. Tillis was the original bank manager, the one Eliza had noted in the ledger, the one who had not appeared when Garrett went to the bank, replaced instead by Fowler. "Where is Tillis?" she asked. Garrett was very still. "He transferred to the Laramie branch 2 months ago. I was told it was a promotion." They looked at each other. "Or he was moved before this came to a head," she said, "so his name wouldn't be directly attached to the Caldwell Flats branch when the note irregularity surfaced. And his daughter is passing information from Denny to her father," Eliza said. "Not necessarily deliberately. People tell people they care about things. It's what people do." The silence was not angry. It was the specific silence of a problem that has just been located and has not yet been solved. "I'll talk to Denny," Garrett said. "Carefully," she said. "Don't accuse. We don't know that Denny has done anything wrong. We know information has moved in a direction it shouldn't. We need that to stop without losing the loyalty of a man who has worked for you for 4 years. Garrett looked at her. "How would you handle it?" "Tell him the truth," she said. "That you're in a legal situation that requires strict confidentiality. That anything said on this ranch stays on this ranch until further notice. Give him the dignity of the real explanation and trust him to respond to it." That's... He paused. "That's a better approach than I would have taken." "What would you have taken?" "I would have been considerably less informative and considerably more direct about the consequences," he said. "That gets compliance," she said. "It doesn't get loyalty." He absorbed that. Then he stood. "I'll talk to him before breakfast." He went. She picked up her pen. Outside, the Monday that knew what it carried was getting fully underway. Denny, it turned out, was exactly what Garrett had described, a 4-year hand who had never done anything dishonest in his life, and who turned pale, and then red, and then pale again, when Garrett laid out the situation plainly. "I didn't tell her anything specific," Denny said. He was standing in the barn hat, completely destroyed in his hands. She asked how things were going at the ranch, and I said you'd brought in a lawyer from Cheyenne. I didn't think I didn't know." "I know you didn't," Garrett said. "That's why I'm telling you, not firing you." Denny looked up. He looked like a man who expected to be fired, and was not sure what to do with not being fired. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing leaves this ranch," Garrett said. "Nothing you hear, nothing you see, nothing that arrives or departs. You understand?" "Yes, sir." "Good." Garrett turned to go. "Mr. Masterson." Denny's voice stopped him. "I've got a message here. Came in this morning before you were up. I was going to bring it to the house." He pulled a folded note from his coat pocket. "A boy brought it from town. Said a man gave him $1 to deliver it fast." Garrett took the note. He read it. He walked back to the house without a word to Denny, and the speed of his walk told Eliza before he opened the door that whatever the note said was not good. He set it in front of her. It was short. No signature. "The judge hearing territorial fraud matters has been reassigned. New judge appointed this morning. Name is Aldous Crane. Look up Crane. Then tell your wife to be careful." Eliza read it twice. "Who sent this?" "I don't know," Garrett said. "Someone who knows about Aldridge," she said. "Someone who wants us to know about Crane but doesn't want their name attached to the warning." She was already standing, already reaching for her coat. "I need to get a wire to Aldridge before the filing goes forward." "The filing is at 9, Garrett said. "It's 7:40. "Then we don't have time to discuss it," she said. The wire to Aldridge went from the Caldwell Flats telegraph office at 8:12. Eliza wrote it herself, standing at the counter in the compressed language of someone working against a clock. "Do not file until you investigate Aldous Crane. New judge. Unknown connection. Received warning. Source unknown. Delay if possible. E. Masterson." The telegraph operator, a young man who had the decency to be fast, sent it without comment. Eliza stood in the office and waited. Garrett stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the steadiness of him, which she was grateful for, and did not say so. The reply came 41 minutes later. Filing delayed. Crane is Crenshaw Syndicate's Denver Attorneys College roommate, appointed by Governor 2 weeks ago. Not a coincidence. We have a problem. Calling in territorial marshal. Do not go to court. Stay at the ranch. Aldridge. Eliza read the wire. Then she read it again. "The syndicate got their own judge appointed," Garrett said. He read it over her shoulder. His voice was very flat. "Before we could file," she said. "They knew Aldridge was coming. They moved faster than we did on that piece." She folded the wire. Her mind was moving quickly through the new structure of the problem. The territorial marshal, that's federal jurisdiction. Crane can't touch a federal proceeding. How long does that take? Longer than a territorial court hearing, she said. Possibly weeks. And in the meantime, she said, Crenshaw's claim is still on file with the county. Crane can expedite a hearing on the Hollis acreage before the federal process gets moving. She looked at Garrett. We need to file a counterclaim with the county today, not through the territorial court, directly with the county records office as property holders contesting a fraudulent annotation on a deed. Fitch, Garrett said. Fitch, she confirmed. He took 40 minutes to find a file. He took 40 minutes because I said I'd wait, she said. Today, I'm going to say something different. Fitch. When Eliza walked into the county records office 20 minutes later and told him she was filing a formal contestation of a deed annotation on the grounds of document fraud, turned a color that suggested he had been expecting this visit and had been hoping it would not arrive today specifically. A formal contestation requires, he started. Section 14 of the Wyoming Territorial Property Code, she said. A joint property holder may file a written contestation of any deed annotation at the county records office with a certified copy of the original deed filing and a signed affidavit attesting to the discrepancy. I have the certified copy, the affidavit, and the filing fee. She set all three on the counter. The submission requires only your date stamp and your signature as receiving officer. Fitch looked at the documents. He looked at Garrett, who was doing his large and patient background presence again, with particular effect. He looked back at Eliza. The annotation in question was filed by, he started. By an unknown party using access available to county officers and licensed attorneys, she said. That determination is for the territorial marshal's investigation, not for this office. Your role today is simply to receive a properly formatted contestation filing. She tapped the papers on the counter. Mr. Fitch, I need your date stamp. He date-stamped the filing. His hand was not entirely steady when he did it. She noticed. She took the stamped copy. She walked out. Garrett caught the door behind her. On the boardwalk outside, he said, Section 14 of the Wyoming Territorial Property Code. Yes, she said. You memorized it. I memorized the relevant portions of the Territorial Property Code the second day I was at Broken Spur, she said. I thought it might be necessary. He stopped walking. She took 2 more steps before she realized he wasn't beside her and turned back. He was looking at her with an expression she hadn't seen before on his face. Not the recalibration, not the almost smile, not the deep, considering look. Something rawer than any of those. Something that a more guarded man would have put away before it showed. What? She said. Nothing, he said. But he said it in a way that meant everything, and she was entirely capable of reading the difference, and they both knew it. Garrett, she said. We should get back, he said. Aldridge may have sent another wire. She looked at him for a moment. Then she turned, and they walked back to the wagon side by side. And she did not press it because she had learned that Garrett Masterson said important things at the speed he was capable of saying them, and not one moment faster, and that pressing only made him go slower. She could be patient. She was very good at patient. Aldridge's next wire arrived that afternoon and changed the shape of everything again. Marshal's office confirmed. Investigation opening Friday. Crenshaw aware he's moving. Filing injunction against Broken Spur title transfer to block the deed resolution before Friday. You have until Thursday to get ahead of it. I need Eliza in Cheyenne. Her testimony about the Crenshaw visit is the clearest chain of evidence we have for intent. Can she travel Wednesday? Garrett read it. He handed it to Eliza. He watched her read it. He wants me in Cheyenne, she said. I read it. That means leaving the ranch for at least 3 days. I read it, he said again. She looked at him. You don't want me to go. It's not about what I want, he said. It's about whether it's safe. Crenshaw knows you're the axis this whole thing is turning on. He's filing an injunction because you filed the contestation today. He'll know within the hour that you were in Cheyenne. I'll be with Aldridge, she said, and the marshal's office. You'll be 80 miles from this ranch, he said. The statement sat there plainly. Not a demand, not a prohibition. Just a man saying the thing he was actually thinking, which she had asked him for from the beginning, and was discovering was a harder thing to receive than she'd anticipated when she'd asked for it. You're worried about me, she said. He met her gaze directly. Yes. Garrett. I understand it's necessary, he said. I'm not telling you not to go. I'm telling you that I will worry about you every hour that you're not on this ranch, and I needed to say that before we talk about logistics, because I am still learning how to say things like that out loud, and I needed to do it while I still had the momentum. She was quiet for a moment. She looked at this man, this careful, stubborn, slowly opening man, and felt something move in her chest that was not gratitude, and was not relief, and was not the practical warmth of a fair arrangement. I will wire you every evening, she said. From Aldridge's office. Every evening, without exception. All right, he said. And I will be back by Saturday. All right, he said again. Then, after a pause, I'll have Pearl make something decent for Saturday dinner. The corner of her mouth moved. Something decent. High praise from Pearl. Don't tell her I said that, he said. She'll make something deliberately average out of spite. Eliza looked at him. At the dry, unexpected, completely real humor in his voice, the part of him she had been discovering in installments, the part that lived underneath all that controlled Wyoming stillness. I won't tell her, she said. Wednesday morning, Garrett drove her to the stage himself. Pearl had packed her a travel bag with more food in it than any reasonable person needed for an 80-mile journey, which Eliza chose to interpret as Pearl's way of expressing feelings Pearl would not under any circumstances express in words. At the stage depot, they stood in the cold morning air with 5 minutes before departure, and Garrett said nothing for 4 of them. Eliza let him have the 4 minutes. With 1 minute left, he said, "When I wrote that advertisement, I wrote it 6 times before I got it right. Every version before the last one said something about companionship or someone to build a life with. I took all of that out. I thought it was—" He stopped. Tried again. "I thought wanting those things was a vulnerability, something that could be used against me." She looked at him steadily. "It was not a good advertisement," he said. "But you answered it anyway." "I answered the practical version," she said, "and I found the rest of it in person." He looked at her. "The rest of it," he said. "The parts you edited out," she said quietly. The stage driver called the boarding signal. Around them, 2 other passengers moved toward the door. Garrett reached out and took her hand. Not a formal gesture, not the handshake of a business arrangement. Just his hand covering hers for the length of a breath. "Come back Saturday," he said. "I will," she said. She boarded the stage. She did not look back, because looking back was not something she did anymore. She had spent too many years looking back at things she should have left faster. But she was aware of him standing there in the cold October morning watching until the stage moved. She knew this the way she knew things she hadn't been told directly. She had become, she realized, very good at knowing things about Garrett Masterson. Cheyenne was 3 days of the most concentrated work she had done in her life. Aldridge met her at the stage with 2 associates and a marshal's deputy named Reeves, who had the steady, unhurried manner of someone who had built cases before and knew that speed made errors. They went directly to Aldridge's office and spent the first afternoon going through her 42 pages of notes, line by line, sourcing every claim, flagging every point where testimony would need to match documentation. The Crenshaw visit was central, as Aldridge had said. She walked them through it 4 times the exact words Crenshaw had used in what order in response to what she had or had not said. Reeves took notes in a small book and asked questions that were blunt and specific and occasionally uncomfortable. "He said Eastern Sector by name," Reeves said. "Verbatim," she said. "And you had not mentioned the Eastern Sector at any point in the conversation prior." "I had not mentioned any specific acreage," she said. "I said only that every ranch had complexities," Reeves wrote. Reeves. And his response was to reference the eastern acreage specifically. "Yes." "Which means he had prior knowledge of the deed specifics." "Which is only available in the Hollis deed documentation," she said. "To which my husband, his former lawyer, and the county records office all had access." Reeves looked at her. He had the expression of a man reassessing something. "Mrs. Masterson, are you familiar with how we build an evidence chain in a federal investigation?" "I've read the relevant statutes," she said. He looked at Aldridge. Aldridge, to his credit, did not smile. He simply made a small gesture that communicated, "I know I told you," without requiring words. "All right," Reeves said. "Let's go through it again." Thursday brought the twist no one in Cheyenne had anticipated. Harmon walked into the marshal's office at 10 in the morning without a lawyer and without an appointment, and asked to speak with Deputy Reeves. Eliza was in the back office reviewing documents when Aldridge came to find her, and the expression on his face stopped her before he spoke. "Harmon is here," he said. She set down her pen. "Here in Cheyenne." "Asking to cooperate," Aldridge said. "He says he has documentation on the syndicate that we don't have. He says he was coerced. He says he wants a deal." The room was completely quiet. "Coerced," she said. "His daughter," Aldridge said. "Crenshaw's syndicate made a loan to Harmon's daughter's husband 2 years ago. A business loan. The kind with terms that are fine until they're not. When Harmon pushed back on the broken spur assignment, they called the loan. Threatened his son-in-law's business." Eliza sat very still, processing the new shape of it. Harmon had not been a mastermind. He had been a lever, a man with something to lose who had been found and used. He falsified the county record, she said. He says Crenshaw's man guided him to the record and told him what to write, Aldridge said. Harmon believes he can identify that man. That puts someone inside the county records office, she said. Or someone with enough access to bring Harmon there unobserved, Aldridge said. Fitch may have looked the other way, or someone above Fitch. She thought of Fitch's unsteady hand on the date stamp Tuesday, the way his color had changed when she walked in. The county commissioner, she said. Aldridge looked at her. That's where Reeves is looking right now. She stood up. I need to send a wire to my husband. Use the front office, Aldridge said. And Eliza. He stopped himself on the name corrected Mrs. Masterson. The case is breaking open faster than I expected. Reeves is going to want your testimony in a formal statement before Friday. Can you do that today? Yes, she said. After the wire. She went to the front office. She wrote the wire to Garrett in the compressed factual language they had developed over the past weeks. The language that got the most information into the fewest words, because that was the kind of communication their particular minds made naturally when they were working together. Harmon cooperating. Commissioner under investigation. Case moves. Friday. I am well. Wire me when you have this. E. She sent it. She went back to give her formal statement. She was on solid ground. She was doing what she was built to do. And underneath all of it, quietly and persistently, she was thinking about Saturday. His reply wire came at 7 that evening while she was eating a late supper at the boarding house near Aldridge's office. She unfolded it at the table alone with her food and the quiet of a room that was not Broken Spur. Received. Commissioner's name, Henderson. Check if Henderson and Tillis are connected. I think they are. Pearl made the good pot roast tonight. The ranch is quieter than it should be. Saturday. G. She read it twice. She read the part about the ranch being quieter than it should be 3 times. Then she folded the wire, put it in her coat pocket, and finished her supper. She had one more day of work to do in Cheyenne. Then she was going home. Henderson and Tillis were connected. It took Reeves 40 minutes Friday morning to find it Tillis had married Henderson's wife's younger sister in 1879. A family arrangement quiet and domestic and completely invisible unless you were looking for the thread that connected a bank manager's reassignment to a county commissioner's office that had allowed a deed annotation to be falsified on its watch. When Eliza gave Reeves the connection from Garrett's wire, Reeves looked up from his notes and said, "Your husband found that from the ranch." "He found the name," she said. "I found the marriage record in the Cheyenne archive this morning." She set the relevant page in front of him. It completes the chain. Commissioner Henderson facilitated access. Tillis moved the banking side. Harmon handled the legal documentation. Crenshaw's syndicate coordinated all 3 and provided the financial motive. Reeves looked at the page. He looked at her. "Mrs. Masterson," he said. "I have been a marshal's deputy for 11 years. "Yes," she said. "I have worked cases with lawyers, with judges, with investigators, with 20 years of experience." He paused. "The documentation chain you built from a ranch kitchen in 3 weeks is as clean as anything I have seen in those 11 years. She held his gaze. "I had a good ledger," she said, "and a talkative housekeeper." He blinked. "And a husband who knew his land and trusted me to read it," she added. That part mattered considerably. She left Reeves's office at noon. She packed her travel bag at the boarding house. She was at the stage depot by 1 o'clock. She was going home. And for the first time in Eliza Masterson's life, that word home meant exactly what it was supposed to mean, and not one thing less. The stage pulled into Caldwell Flats on Saturday afternoon, and Garrett was already there. Not waiting on the boardwalk with his hat in his hands, not pacing, just standing beside the wagon with his arms crossed and his eyes on the road the way a man stands when he has been standing there long enough that he has run out of things to do with the waiting except endure it. Eliza stepped off the stage, and he was moving before she had both feet on the ground. He did not say anything. He took her travel bag from her hand and looked at her face the way a man looks at something he has been rehearsing worrying about for 3 days and is now confirming is intact. "I told you Saturday," she said. "You did," he said. "And here I am." "Here you are," he said. His voice was steady, but something underneath it was not entirely steady, and she heard that part clearly. She looked at him, at the 3 days of contained worry written in the set of his jaw and the particular quality of his stillness, and she made a decision that surprised even herself. She put her hand on his arm. Just that. Just her hand on his arm in the middle of the Caldwell Flats stage depot in plain view of anyone who happened to be looking. He looked down at her hand. Then he looked at her. "Let's go home," she said. In the wagon, she told him everything. Not the compressed wire language version, the full version in order start to finish. Harmon walking into the marshal's office. The daughter's husband and the coerced loan. Reeves and the 11 years of cases. The Henderson-Tillis marriage record she had found in the Cheyenne archive on a Friday morning before the stage. Garrett listened without interrupting, which she had come to understand was his highest form of attention. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Harmon came in voluntarily." "Yes. He could have run." "He could have," she agreed. Another silence. "His daughter," Garrett said. It was not a defense of the man. It was just Garrett Masterson doing what he always did, taking in information, weighing it, arriving at a position that was honest rather than convenient. "A man with something to lose is the easiest man to use," Eliza said, "and the most dangerous to Crenshaw once he decided the cost of staying was higher than the cost of coming forward." "Do you feel—" Garrett started and stopped. "After everything Harmon did to this ranch, do you feel anything toward him for coming forward?" She thought about it honestly. "I feel that he made the right decision when he still had one to make," she said. "I don't feel warmth toward him, but I don't feel the need to add to his consequences. The law will handle that." Garrett nodded slowly. "Fair," he said. Then, after a pause, "Pearl made the pot roast again tonight. Because you're coming back." She would not say that was the reason. Eliza felt something in her chest that was warm and uncomplicated and entirely real. "Of course she wouldn't," she said. Pearl met her at the door with an expression that was not a welcome, and was also completely a welcome, which Eliza had learned to read accurately over the past weeks. "You look tired," Pearl said. "I am tired," Eliza said. "Supper's at 6. Don't be late." Pearl turned and went back to the kitchen. Then from the hallway without turning around, "Glad you're back." Eliza stood in the entry of Broken Spur Ranch and let that land. 3 syllables. "Glad you're back." From Pearl, who had looked at her with pure suspicion for the first 48 hours of her existence in this house. From Pearl, who expressed feelings the way certain rocks express water only under considerable pressure and in very small amounts. It was, Eliza decided, one of the finest things anyone had said to her in recent memory. Monday brought Reeves. He rode in from Caldwell Flats with 2 deputies and a folder of documents that he spread across the kitchen table with the methodical efficiency of a man who had done this enough times to have a system. Crenshaw had been formally charged Friday evening, 2 hours after Eliza's stage left Cheyenne. The charges were fraud conspiracy to defraud, falsification of public records, and criminal coercion, the last count on the basis of the loan used to manipulate Harmon. His Denver attorney had appeared by wire within the hour. The syndicate had issued a statement through that attorney expressing surprise and denying knowledge. "They always deny knowledge," Reeves said in the tone of a man reporting weather. "What about the judge?" Garrett asked. "Crane. Removed from the matter Friday morning before the charges were filed," Reeves said. The territorial governor was made aware of the connection to the syndicate's Denver attorney. He moved quickly. A pause. Governors tend to move quickly when they discover they've been used. Henderson, Eliza said, the county commissioner. Resigned Saturday. His office is being audited. Reeves looked at her. The falsified annotation on the Hollis deed has been formally struck from the county record as of Friday. The contestation you filed Tuesday is now moot. There's nothing left to contest. The annotation doesn't exist anymore. Garrett was very still. The Hollis acreage. The original deed stands without the annotation, Reeves said. With that annotation removed, the syndicate has no historical claim. The county's claim under the deed technicality is still pending, but... He paused and looked at them both. Your filing of the marriage document satisfied the deed requirement. You married before December 1st. The transfer of the Hollis acreage to sole ownership is legally clean. The kitchen was completely quiet. It's over, Garrett said. Not a question. Like a man testing a word he has not let himself use yet. The criminal proceedings will continue for some time, Reeves said. You'll both be called as witnesses. But as regards Broken Spur Ranch and the eastern acreage, yes, it's over. Eliza looked at the table, at the folder of documents, at the 42 pages of notes she had made in the first 3 weeks of her marriage sitting in a neat stack on the sideboard where she had put them the night before, so they'd be ready for this meeting. She had arrived in this territory with $11 and a battered trunk. She looked up at Garrett. He was looking at her with that expression, the one she had run out of neutral language for weeks ago, the one that was not calculation, and not analysis, and not any of the careful practical categories they had constructed their arrangement inside of. She had names for it now. She had been saving them. Reeves left by noon. The deputies went with him. Pearl cleared the coffee cups with the brisk efficiency of someone who understands that a room sometimes needs to be emptied. Garrett and Eliza were left at the kitchen table with the folder of documents and the settled weighted quiet of something that was finished. The banknote, Eliza said, because there was still work, and the work steadied her. With the fraud charges documented, we have grounds to contest the rolled-over terms. Aldridge thinks we can recover the $340, plus the difference in the compounded rate. Eliza, Garrett said. It should be straightforward now that Tillis is... Eliza, he said again, quieter, more deliberate. She stopped. He looked at her from across the table. The banknote can wait 20 minutes, he said. She looked back at him. All right, she said. He was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup slowly in his hands. Not drinking, just holding it the way she had noticed him hold things when he was building toward something. I have been thinking, he said, about something you said on the day I drove you to the stage. She waited. You said you were not looking for what you found here, he said. You said you were looking for safety and ground that wouldn't shift, and that you did not expect to find someone worth fighting for. I remember saying that, she said. I have been carrying that sentence for 4 days, he said. On this ranch without you here with Pearl's pot roast that she made for reasons she would not name, and the eastern pasture that you helped me keep, and every single day since you arrived and showed me the ledger and told me the truth, I had been avoiding. He stopped. He put the cup down. He looked at her directly with the full, unguarded weight of a man who has decided that this is the moment and he will not flinch from it. I need to ask you something. Ask, she said. Her voice was completely even. Her hands under the table were not. When Aldridge's letter first came, he said, the one with the terms of the arrangement, I wrote agreed, and I sent it because I needed a solution, and you were the clearest solution I had found. He paused. I want to ask you, and I want you to answer honestly the way you have answered everything honestly since the first letter, whether you would be willing to be here not as a solution, not as a legal arrangement, not as a partner in a contract that either party can dissolve by mutual agreement after 1 year. The kitchen was absolutely still. I want to ask, he said, whether you would stay because you want to be here, because this is where you want to be, Because He stopped, took a breath, let it out. Because I want you here. Not for the ranch, not for the eastern acreage. For me. Because 3 weeks with you in this house has shown me something I had edited out of every draft of every version of myself I had written for the past 15 years, and I am not willing to edit it out again. Eliza looked at this man, at Garrett Masterson, who had written an advertisement 6 times and removed all the parts that mattered and sent the practical remainder, and somehow still ended up here at this table saying this. She thought about Ohio, about the sound of footsteps in a hallway, about $11 and a cut above her left eye, and a freight wagon and a small newspaper advertisement folded carefully into her coat pocket. She thought about the first letter she had written him, precise and honest, and asking for nothing but a fair arrangement and the chance to prove her usefulness. She had proven considerably more than that. "Garrett," she said. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were clear. "I stopped thinking of this as an arrangement somewhere around the 3rd morning, when you came in from the range and asked me what I needed from you, and it was the most natural sentence anyone had said to me in years." She folded her hands on the table. "I am here because I want to be here. I have been here because I want to be here for longer than it would have been professional to admit." He looked at her for a long moment. "You could have said something." "So could you," she said. Something shifted entirely in his face, all the control, all the careful management of expression that she had been reading in installments for weeks, all of it giving way at once to something honest and complete and completely his. He reached across the table. He put his hand over hers, both of them this time covering her folded hands entirely. "Stay," he said. "Not the arrangement, not the contract, just stay." "I'm already here," she said. "I know," he said. "I want to hear you say it." She looked at him, at his hands over hers, at the kitchen of Broken Spur Ranch, unglamorous and real, with Pearl clattering something in the back hallway, and the October wind crossing the eastern pasture, and the deed to that pasture sitting clean and legal in a folder on the table, and her 42 pages of notes on the sideboard, and all of it built on 3 letters and 1 practical advertisement, and 2 people who had arrived at something true by the most honest route they knew. "I'll stay," she said. "Not the arrangement, not the contract." She turned her hands under his until she was holding his hands rather than being held by them. "Because this is home, and because you are why." Pearl appeared in the doorway approximately 30 seconds later, which Eliza suspected was not a coincidence. "I need to know," Pearl said, looking at neither of them, and very deliberately at the middle distance, "whether there will be 2 people at supper or whether one of you is riding somewhere." "2 people," Garrett said. He did not let go of Eliza's hands. "Good," Pearl said. "I made the good bread." She disappeared back into the hallway. Eliza looked at Garrett. "The good bread," she said. "Different from the regular bread," he said. "You'll understand when you taste it." "She knew," Eliza said. "She's known for weeks." "Pearl has always known everything," Garrett said. "She simply declines to acknowledge it until the relevant parties catch up." Eliza laughed. It was a full, unguarded laugh, the kind she had not had occasion to produce in longer than she could accurately remember, the kind that comes from somewhere real rather than somewhere performed. She heard it come out of her and thought without drama that she had not known until this moment how much she had missed the sound of her own genuine laughter. Garrett watched her laugh with an expression that was the best version of the one she had been learning all this time. Warm and specific and entirely for her. The weeks that followed moved differently from any weeks Eliza had previously experienced. Not easier necessarily. The ranch was a working ranch. Winter was coming. The witness preparation for the criminal proceedings against Crenshaw and his syndicate required time and precision, and Aldridge's case against the bank's note irregularities demanded the same careful documentation as everything that had come before it. The work did not diminish. But the weight of it was different. The weight of work you choose, done alongside someone you have chosen in a place you have decided is yours. That weight is not a burden. It is something closer to ballast. It keeps you steady, rather than pulling you down. She renegotiated the banknote terms in November. Recovered $412.62 more than she had originally calculated, because the bank's eagerness to settle quietly in the wake of the fraud charges gave her a negotiating position she exploited without apology. She deposited the recovered amount directly into the ranch operating account and showed Garrett the deposit slip across the breakfast table. He looked at it. He looked at her. 412, he said. I found an additional irregularity in the February statement, she said. It seemed worth including. He put the deposit slip down. You are, he said, the most formidable person I have ever met. You say that every time I find money they owe us, she said, because every time I mean it more than I did before, he said. The criminal hearing for Crenshaw's syndicate was set for January in Cheyenne, before a territorial judge with no connections to Denver investment syndicates or county commissioners or the college roommates of either. Reeves had been thorough about that. Crenshaw's attorney entered a negotiated plea the week before the hearing date, which Aldridge described in a wire as a man who has read the evidence and understood his options. 3 members of the syndicate followed within days. Henderson, the former county commissioner, agreed to full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Tillis, the reassigned bank manager, was charged separately in Laramie. Harmon received a suspended sentence on the basis of his cooperation and the documented coercion. Garrett, when Aldridge asked whether the ranch wished to submit a statement regarding Harmon's sentencing, sat with it for 2 days. Then he wrote a single paragraph. He showed it to Eliza before it went. She read it. It was precise and honest, and neither forgiving nor vindictive. It stated the facts of what Harmon had done, the facts of what he had faced, and concluded that the law was better positioned than any individual to weigh those facts, and that Broken Spur Ranch had no additional statement to make. That's right, she said, handing it back. I had help knowing what right looked like, he said. December 1st came the original deed deadline that had started everything. Garrett was already awake when Eliza came downstairs that morning, standing at the kitchen window with his coffee. He heard her on the stairs and turned. December 1st, he said. I know, she said. The deed transferred officially last week, he said. The county filed the paperwork Wednesday. It's done. I know, she said. She poured her coffee. How do you feel? He was quiet for a moment. The question was not one he would have known how to receive in October. She had watched him learn to receive it. Like something I've been braced against for a long time isn't there to brace against anymore, he said. And like I'm not sure what to do with my hands. I have a suggestion, she said. What? She set her coffee down. She crossed the kitchen, not far. The kitchen was not large and stood in front of him. She put both hands flat on his chest, the way she had not quite let herself do in all the weeks of careful, and then less careful, and then not careful at all. Stop bracing, she said. He looked at her. He set his coffee cup down. He put his arms around her and held her the way a man holds something he has been afraid to reach for and has finally reached for and found real solid and exactly what he hoped. She let herself be held. She did not tally anything. She did not analyze the position, or consider its implications, or assess it for usefulness. She just let it be what it was, which was everything. Pearl walked in 3 minutes later, assessed the situation in approximately 1 second, said, "Coffee's going to get cold," and walked back out. They separated. They picked up their coffee cups. They looked at each other. "Pearl," Garrett said. "Pearl," Eliza agreed. They drank their coffee standing side by side at the window, watching the morning come in over the eastern pasture, the pasture his father had bought for 40 cents an acre in a drought year that Crenshaw's syndicate had spent 18 months trying to take that Eliza's 42 pages of notes and her county records requests and her morning in Cheyenne and her signed bank statement and her one formal contestation filing had helped keep where it belonged. The grass was frost-pale and real, and entirely theirs. "I've been thinking," Garrett said. "About what?" "The advertisement," he said. "The original. The one I wrote 6 times." She looked at him. "The last version," he said. "The practical one. The one I sent." He paused. "I think if I were writing it now, it would be considerably shorter." "How short?" she said. He looked at her. Outside, the frost-pale grass of the eastern pasture caught the first light of the December morning, and the ranch that had survived a drought and a conspiracy, and a falsified deed, and a coerced lawyer, and a judge appointed by a college roommate was alive and whole and going to stay that way. "4 words," he said. She looked at him steadily. "Which 4? "I have found home," he said. The kitchen was warm. The coffee was good. Pearl was moving in the back hallway with the particular sounds of a woman who has decided that the people in her house are going to be fed properly, whether they ask for it or not. And Eliza Masterson, who had arrived in Wyoming territory with $11 and a healed cut above her left eye, and the quiet, unshakable conviction that she was not too old, and not too much, and not too anything. Only exactly what she was, which turned out to be precisely enough. Set down her coffee cup and looked at the man beside her, and knew with the same certainty she brought to numbers and ledgers and evidence chains that this was the truest and most permanent accounting she had ever completed. She had come west looking for ground that wouldn't shift. What she had found was better ground worth standing on, and a man worth standing beside, and a life built not on the terms of an advertisement or the requirements of a legal contract, but on the only foundation that has ever made anything last: the daily chosen, unglamorous, completely real decision to stay.